You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise and Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. Except today's episode is just a little bit different. I'm in not so sunny California visiting Payton and Garrett for their Murder with My Husband live show that was held in Irvine, and we're coming to you from the Ono Media Studios. Hello, Payton.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to be on Rise and Crime. If you guys know, this is one of our shows on Ono Media, and this is my mom. I feel like maybe some of your listeners don't know that.
I think especially on YouTube, there's probably a difference. And so, yeah, I mean, the various platforms, I think there are some people that don't realize that Payton Moreland is my daughter and Garrett Moreland is my son-in-law.
Yeah, so I have Murder with My Husband and Into the Dark, which is my solo show. And then now I'm on Rise and Crime, and I'm ready for today's cases.
Okay, so we're going to get to a couple of cases, but first, I was thinking after your live show, some people at the live show were asking how you got the nickname Roan in our household. Yeah. So why don't you tell people, how did you come with that nickname?
So when I was little, my dad started calling me Payton, and then kind of everyone in my immediate family started calling me Payton, and then Payton eventually just turned into Roan, and it stuck, but only for my family. So it's not like anyone else in my life calls me Roan, just my family calls me Roan. And one day, if I ever have kids, I will name one of them Roan for sure.
Which I'm so excited to have a grandchild named that. Probably a girl.
Yeah, probably a girl. I would think it, unless I only had boys, then I would use it. But probably a girl. So I was going to add on that this actually worked out really well because Payton would go and dance at these conventions, competitions, and her dad would be in the audience and he would scream for her and he would yell, let's go Roan or something like that. And so it was really awesome because there wasn't ever going to be another girl named that. Right. But there was, some other Paytons. Yeah. So she clearly knew her father was cheering for it, which is really fun to have that. Okay. And we also rarely get told we look alike. Some people see it more now that Payton's hair is darker. Yeah. But not very many people think we look alike, but I think we get told we act alike. Yeah, often. And our mannerisms when we talk. Yeah, like you might be able to notice some of the things we do with our hands or whatever. They're the same. Yeah. Okay. Should we dive in? Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So I've got a couple of cases today. And if you'll remember, if you're an avid listener of Murder with My Husband, I've appeared on Murder with My Husband twice. And we recorded in the living room of your townhome. So that was 3 houses ago. And we hadn't started YouTube. Like there was we were in the early phases. It was very early, but we had an awesome time. And it had to be 2 episodes because we talked so long about this particularly high-profile case in East Idaho, and that's where Payton grew up. Right. I still live in East Idaho, so we're going to do an update on the Chad and Lori Daybell cult-like murder saga, and sadly, Chad's been accused and Lori's been found guilty for killing 2 innocent children. So these are Lori's children, 8-year-old JJ Vallow and 17-year-old Tylee Ryan. And then she's also been found guilty for the death of Chad's first wife, 49-year-old Tammy Daybell. All right. So, and then Chad, he's obviously on trial right now. And my avid listeners have seen that I've done updates on that. But we're going to go over the case and I'm going to kind of get your opinion on things. So let's talk geography. Where you grew up was about a 30-minute drive from the home of Chad Daybell in Salem, Idaho, and that's where the bodies of JJ and Tylee were found buried. And that all occurred back in June of 2022 when those bodies were found. Right. But prosecutors believe the children had been dead since the fall of 2019. And this is a really small community in Rexburg, Idaho, and Salem, Idaho. So Salem's on the outskirts of Rexburg. And there's a college affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints called Brigham Young University, Idaho, or BYU, Idaho. You might know it by BYU's huge in Provo. Right. Actually, about 5 minutes from where you went to school at Utah Valley.
Okay, the population of Rexburg is about 40,000, and that includes like the outskirts. So it's a very small community. But there's about 14,000 students that attend on-campus classes at the university at any given time. So, I mean, it's an influx to the area.
Right.
Chad and his wife, Tammy, and their kids had moved to Rexburg, Idaho from Utah after Chad said he had received revelation that Rexburg is going to become the hub of activity in the last days. And that those last days activities would be like Jesus Christ coming back and basically the nation falling apart. And Chad and eventually Lori felt like they were going to be the leaders during this time. And Chad explained all of this in some apocalyptic books that he had written. And I've seen those books. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, they lacked massive creativity. I feel like Chad basically aligned himself with another author and public speaker. Her name is Julie Rowe. And I feel like he stole some of her ideas, some of the versions of how the world is going to come to an end. Mm-hmm. And then he just built his own books and tried to gain popularity over it.
Right.
I also got to see one of his books the other day.
Really?
Yeah. Someone delivered it to a studio that I work out of. And as you open up the front page of that book, the very first page dedicates all of his writings to his wife, Tammy.
That he murdered.
That he allegedly murdered. Mm-hmm. And that his lover, Lori, has been found guilty of.
Of murdering.
Yeah. So Chad, he's writing these books. He's finding some marginal success on religious podcasts and speaking at events. And this is how he meets up with Lori.
This is how they meet. After Lori's very complicated past.
Oh, incredibly complicated past. Right. She's on her fourth husband. There's been claims of abuse from previous husbands. She is now the mother of a young boy named JJ, who I introduced at the beginning of this episode. He is autistic. He's got some developmental delays, and she's the adoptive mother of this child. And that is who she's taking care of, this child, based upon her fourth husband, Charles Vallow.
Right.
Okay. She also has Tylee. Then she has an older son who has left the house at this time. And so her past is so complicated.
Right.
Okay. So sparks are flying between her and Chad.
Chad's still married at this point. His wife is still alive.
Yes. Yes. Totally alive. Just doing her little thing. She's a librarian. She's just kind of like quiet and soft, and she's doing her thing. And Lori is kind of gregarious. She's been in pageants. Some people consider her really magnetic. And I don't find Chad magnetic at all.
No, but I would say rarely do I think that there's a cult leader who I would, but clearly it works. And I'm not saying he was a cult leader, but he definitely was trying.
Yes.
He was trying.
Yeah. In fact, he seems kind of dull and unassuming, but not scary.
Right.
And I think that's part of it.
That is like inviting. Yeah.
So he's been invited to these speaking arrangements or these podcasts, and this is how he's meeting up with Lori, and their schedules are crossing over, and he even stays at Lori's home in Arizona so that he can give a presentation to like some followers of his teaching. So this is the time when he is gathering people into his little group, and Lori is his biggest cheerleader.
Early days, she's providing a place for him to do it, definitely following along.
Yes, late 2018, early 2019. Okay, Lori's still married to Charles Vallow. Things aren't going well. He begins questioning her connection to several people, including Chad, and it's just not resting well with him. And I'll be honest, it's not resting well with Lori either, because he's now an obstacle to her. So he's become a liability in her new reality that she is this chosen person. And Chad and Lori have decided that this life in 2019, well, it's not the first life that the two have lived together. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have a book of scripture called the Book of Mormon. And Chad and Lori believe they were high-profile people in that book of scripture. I mean,
centuries ago.
It would basically be equivalent to Chad and Lori having a conversation and Chad saying, I, in my past life, was the prophet Noah.
Yes.
And Lori saying, I was Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And then now we've met up in this life and we're getting called again. And this is why we're doing everything we're doing.
Yes. So they've assigned these concepts to themselves. I think it's important to note they've also assigned the concept to themselves that they have received a thing called exaltation. What that means is that they have already been given their right to be God and goddesses in who they believe their higher beings' reality after this earth. So what that means is they can't screw up.
Right.
If they kill somebody, they're not going to be held accountable for it because they've already received their exaltation.
Yes. Yeah.
So imagine what they're going to get away with, like operating
what they think they're going to get away with.
What they think they're going to get away with operating under this concept. I've had so many people ask me that. Why did they do this or why did they do that? Well, they thought they were blameless. They thought that there was no being, including God, that would hold them responsible for what they were about to do. So they're bold. They believe they're these characters or these actual people in Scripture. And Charles threatens Lori and says that he's going to tell Tammy, that's Chad's wife, all about Chad and Lori and their, quote, close relationship. But Chad and Lori have convinced themselves that this just means Charles is dark, like he's inhabited by an evil spirit. And Lori even asked Chad to remove that evil spirit from her husband, Charles. Okay, this is all going on in the first months of 2019. But in July of 2019, Charles is actually in Arizona. He and Lori have been living apart. The marriage is falling apart. He's been in Texas and she's been in Arizona and traveling around. And he decides to come back to Arizona because he's been raising these two kids for several years. He's missing them. And so he comes back to Arizona to visit Lori and the kids. Well, to visit the kids, not really Lori.
Yeah.
Lori's in a new home. And it is so new. She is brand new to this home. This home doesn't even have furniture in it. There's mattresses on the floor, and that's it. And on this July morning in 2019, Charles texts Lori and says that he's coming over before JJ goes to school for the day. And Lori has had her brother Alex with her, on and off, protecting her. And he's been encouraged by Chad. Like, this is a role that has been assigned to Alex, that he is supposed to be Lori's protector.
And Alex, Lori's brother, is all in on Chad and Lori. He's on the bandwagon.
All in. Chad's been giving him spiritual blessings, telling him he's got these responsibilities and that he should be taking care of his sister like this. So he thinks he's doing the right thing. So they're at Lori's house that morning and Charles arrives and they get in a huge argument. We don't really know what the argument's about because we've got to take Alex and Lori's version of it.
Right.
She's telling people she saw his phone. There was stuff on his phone she didn't like, whatever. They're not living together. I don't know why she thinks she had right to that.
Right.
But through all the chaos, Tylee, the 17-year-old, goes and gets a baseball bat from one of the bedrooms. I think this is so weird. There's no furniture in the house, but they've got a baseball bat.
Yeah.
Okay. Through all of the chaos, Charles ends up with the bat in his hand, and Alex says that Charles takes a swing at him and hits him in the back of the head. That's when Alex told police he retrieved a gun from his bedroom and he shoots Charles in self-defense. So,
again, this is all according
to their stories.
To their story.
Yeah. All right. What would be the natural thing to do after somebody gets shot in self-defense?
Especially in self-defense, you obviously call 911, especially with children there, the ex-wife there. It was the 17-year-old who went and got the bat in the first place. So you just immediately call police, right?
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
That's what you would do. But this is not what Alex, nor Lori, nor Tylee, none of them do this. Instead, Alex and Lori carry on in different directions. Lori loads JJ and Tylee up in the car. She heads towards JJ's school. She stops at a fast food restaurant to get JJ some breakfast. Lori also stops at two stores, kind of like a pharmacy store, like if you live somewhere where there's a Walgreens or a CVS. These are the kind of stores she's stopping at. And why does she stop? Because she has to buy herself some shoes. Because she left the house barefoot. to take JJ to school after Charles is shot dead.
Yeah. Let's get some fast. Let's get a hand. Let's get an English McMuffin or a McDonald's McMuffin.
Yeah.
Sausage and egg McMuffin while your dad and my husband is dead or dying on the floor.
Oh, and let's grab some flip-flops at Walgreens.
Yeah. Because I rushed out in such a rush because we had just shot your dad.
Okay. So, so that's what they're doing. They're taking JJ to school. They're getting flip-flops. They're getting breakfast. And what is Alex doing? Well, he's not doing anything. He waits more than a half an hour before calling 911.
And to me, the only reason is because Charles was probably still in the process of dying.
Yeah, you got to buy some time, right? You got to make sure he's really dead before the cops show up because he's probably going to tell a different story.
Right.
Okay. When he eventually does call 911, he refuses to do CPR. That's been instructed by the dispatcher. And when EMS arrive, they determine that Charles has died from the gunshot wound and that Alex has a very small head wound. So small, he's dabbing it with a paper towel and hardly any blood is even coming off on the paper towel. So that raises some questions for me. Charles is a really healthy man. He played college baseball. He swings a bat.
It makes contact.
But the wound is so teeny that there's barely any blood coming off of it.
Alex walked up to the wall and banged it, but was a little scared, so he didn't bang it very hard.
Yeah, that's potential. Or they grabbed a razor blade and said, just barely, nick me back here.
No, not too hard.
Ow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this self-defense murder is just the start of what will be the next 6 months of death and deceit between these two.
Yeah, they're about to rampage.
When Charles died, Lori didn't call the sons from his previous marriage. She sent this cold text telling them their father had died, and then she basically leaves them on red.
Yeah.
For the next few days. So heartless. And she didn't even explain in those texts how Charles had died.
And like I was there and my brother shot him.
Yeah, none of that. And then going forward, her standard explanation to everyone was that Charles died from a heart attack. Like if she's taking JJ to school and explaining what happened or taking him out of school, that's the excuse that she gives. There was no self-defense involved.
She just starts telling people a completely made up story.
Right. So you've got Charles' children in Texas grieving. You've got JJ, this sweet little autistic 7-year-old who's been operating for years with the concept that Charles is his dad. He's grieving, I'm sure. Yeah. And then you've got Tylee, who at the age of 16 is being swept into this adult world of Lori's. And I'm sure she's grieving and not understanding what she's supposed to keep secret and what she's supposed to say.
Yeah.
But then Lori's blindsided by the news she receives a few days later. Charles had removed Lori from his life insurance policy, and texts show how angry she was about this hiccup in her plan. So all of a sudden, she's not going to get this huge payout. But she is going to still be receiving payments for both JJ and Tylee. JJ for Charles' death and Tylee for the death of her father years ago. If you guys don't understand this, Social Security will compensate kids whose parents die. And then that makes it so that the mother or the parent left living can help take care of those children.
And I mean, luckily for Lori, every father dies around her.
Amazing how that happens, right?
She keeps getting these checks.
Yeah, and she needs the cash because she doesn't work and she's moving all the time. She's going back and forth from Hawaii. She's got to have this cash. Well, shortly after Charles' death, Lori moves to Rexburg, Idaho. Then about 7 or 8 minutes away from her home in Rexburg is the family of Chad and Tammy Daybell. So
Tammy's still alive.
Tammy's still alive, and how convenient.
Yeah.
And Chad's still married, but I told you how small this city is. You know how small it is.
You're not getting away with anything here.
You're not getting away with anything in this city. Everyone knows and there's a lot of continued family lines, generational lines.
Yes.
So everyone knows everyone. And right now would be a good time to remind people that Chad's own brother lives just down the road from Chad and Tammy.
Yeah.
Yet Chad and Tammy are out and about, Chad and Lori are out and about.
Through the city.
They're in the city. They're going to the university track and walking laps holding hands.
But he's married.
But Chad's married to Tammy.
And everyone's like, Everyone knows them.
Yes.
Everyone knows he's married, and everyone sees him holding hands with Lori.
Yes. He even gets spotted at a local grocery store called Brolam's, one of our favorites, right?
Yeah.
And he's seen there walking in with her. So it's just obvious these two have something going on. Yeah. And poor Tammy, I don't know if she knew or not. And it never comes out if she knew or not. We never know if she read the email from Charles saying, hey, our spouse are stepping out with each other. We don't know what Tammy thought. But there have been texts shared at both trials, Lori's trial and Chad's trial, that Lori's becoming really demanding and she can't live without Chad anymore. So there's pressure mounting. And then there's other texts that show Lori complaining to Chad about how disobedient her children are, specifically JJ. And I know, right? He's an autistic 7-year-old in general.
Are disobedient.
They misbehave. And think about what this kid's been through. Can you even imagine?
There's no stability. He's being moved all over the place. His father has been just killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even talked with a woman who worked at the school that Lori supposedly enrolled her son JJ into. He attended twice. That's the stability this kid was lacking. Yeah. He had a whole month that he could have attended. And in this special program, she had him in a special program. He showed up twice.
Yeah.
That was it. I feel really bad because he's especially grieving because his dad has died, or the person he knows is his dad has died. So, but there's texting going back and forth between Chad and Lori.
Her husband is now dead at the hands of her brother, and she's saying, Chad, what are you going to do with Tammy?
Yeah. She's demanding things. She's demanding that her kid is evil. Can you take care of this? Can you use these spiritual powers to cleanse JJ of his evils? And then demanding that it's time to get rid of Tammy. Well, finally, on September 8th, so remember Charles died in early July, this is early September. Lori and her brother Alex take JJ and Tylee to Yellowstone National Park. It's about a 2-hour drive from Rexburg. It's a gorgeous place to visit. When's the last time you went to Yellowstone?
I still lived with you at your house.
Yeah, it's been a long time, probably 10, 12 years. Yeah. Okay, well, that visit to Yellowstone appears to be the last sighting of Tylee alive. And prosecutors, through video evidence and photo evidence, and also they access her bank account history, her texting history, and then other app history, like her Venmo account. Well, they believe she was killed that night by Lori and Chad, and secondarily Alex.
And the reason that it's so confusing about what day she goes missing is because we talked about no stability. There's no one expecting to see Tylee. There's no one expecting to see JJ. She can just take them away. So, we did have to go through and figure out when's the last time she was seen, who saw her. And then also it's going to be clear into the next year until someone even notices that they're missing.
Right.
So
this is how she's getting away with it. And like I said, so many people have asked me how, and I'm like, because it was a life of chaos.
Yeah. They're moving everywhere. No one's going to notice that Tylee isn't around.
Yeah. And like I said, JJ only attended school twice during this month. So they believe that she goes missing directly after the Yellowstone visit. Then 2 weeks later, JJ is spotted by others in Lori's neighborhood for the last time. And if you've followed this case, there's an iconic picture out there that has circulated over the last 4 years of JJ on the couch in Lori's rented townhome in his red pajamas. So he's found dead in those pajamas eventually.
And you have to think, so his father figure has just been murdered. And then we believe that Tylee, and the prosecution believes that Tylee is murdered after this Yellowstone trip, but then it's going to be 2 weeks until so during those 2 weeks, Tylee was the only stability in JJ's life.
Can you imagine how sad that was for
him?
And
now all of a sudden Tylee's gone too?
Yeah. This poor boy. Well, having the children. Oh, you know what? We need to bring up one more thing.
What?
Lori also sold his service dog.
Yep.
During this time, Lori sold the service dog. And so that's another form of grounding.
Connection and
that is missing for this little boy.
Yeah.
So sad. Okay.
So both children.
Both children are gone.
But having the children out of the way wasn't enough for Lori and Chad because Tammy's still alive. And this is so frustrating for Lori. She's ready for like vacation life with Chad. Mm-hmm. And you should know Chad's been sharing revelations with his followers that Tammy, his wife, is going to die an early death. And maybe that's because he's setting the table for what happens next. Because on October 19th, Chad says he discovers Tammy dead in their Salem, Idaho home. We're talking within a matter of weeks, the two like anchors to Lori are gone. And now the anchor to Chad is gone.
Yep.
Okay. In these small communities, there isn't a medical examiner.
Right.
And so the coroner made a decision when she showed up on that Saturday morning to not do an autopsy because it's expensive and it's a lot of extra work. And she has taken so much heat over that decision. But I think it's important to remember that the context clues she was working with led her to that decision. It's a super quiet family. Chad is very unassuming. Remember, that's how he gets people to follow him. He's so gentle and calm. And it's a quiet community. There are not murders that happen in nuclear families in East Idaho.
Right. Like, it's just, why would he have killed his wife?
Right. Like, my last episode, we covered all of those individual episodes in Oklahoma where the families have died. If that had happened in East Idaho, oh my goodness, that would rock everyone's worlds because there's so many nuclear families in East Idaho. So they're just, this coroner's just looking at this like, this is a woman who unfortunately died early.
Yes.
Okay, but her critics say that there was bruising visible and that Tammy was healthy and clearly her death should have been investigated. You can side wherever you want to on that. I'm just showing the two sides of this. Okay, 2 weeks before Tammy's death, Lori was shopping for wedding rings and a dress for her upcoming marriage to Chad. That was a big deal in her trial.
Right, because it shows premeditation.
Yeah, totally made her look guilty.
Yeah.
And then, just hours after Tammy dies, Chad is sharing lovey-dovey texts with Lori.
How do you marry someone, have children, create this life? Like, they've been married for a while. Kill your wife, and then 2 hours later, just be totally fine and
I can't wait to start a life with you.
Yeah.
There's something else that Chad does. Super creepy. He asks his friend from Utah, who is a funeral home owner, to expedite the funeral of Tammy. She died on Saturday morning, and her funeral was held in another state. This body had to be transported more than 4 hours by car. That funeral is held on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That is so fast.
Yeah.
So fast. My dad died in a car accident, completely unexpected. He died on a Tuesday morning. We held his funeral on Saturday. I cannot tell you how hard that was to put together.
Just stressful.
So hard, an unexpected death to put everything together by Saturday morning. But we did it specifically because it was the weekend and so many people could travel.
Yeah.
We would have probably gone longer if the days hadn't played out like that. Or she had family members who couldn't even attend this funeral because they couldn't do that kind of turnaround when they found out on Sunday that Tammy had died and they were supposed to be in Utah on Tuesday.
Right.
This is so horrible. Well, testimony about that funeral presented at Chad's trial laid out that Chad had told 2 different stories about his wife's death. And testimony at Chad's trial also showed that Chad was introducing Lori as his new love interest to neighbors about a week and a half after Tammy's death. So he's not even hiding it.
Yeah.
He's parading her around,
right.
Showing everybody, including he was in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple with her. And people are seeing them there.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Also during the month of October, so Tammy dies, the kids are missing, nobody knows they're dead yet. Alex is potentially seen shooting at Lori's niece's husband, Brandon. Okay, this all happened in Arizona in Brandon's neighborhood. Brandon had pulled up to his neighborhood after dropping his kids at school, and someone driving a Jeep similar to a Jeep that Alex was seen driving multiple times lowered a window and shot at Brandon from inside the Jeep. Alex has got an issue with shooting people.
And he also when we said this is just a family of death that's about to come. I mean, Lori's killing her children.
Chad is allegedly killing his wife and Lori's killing his wife. And Alex is over in Arizona trying to kill their niece's husband.
Because he wasn't buying into everything.
He was like, you guys are crazy. This is not happening. You are not gods and goddesses. Like, chill out.
Yeah. And Brandon's questioning them. So obviously he's dark and you have to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Well, trial evidence has shown that Alex's cell phone records have him driving from Rexburg to Arizona and back during that time period. So even though Alex isn't here to defend himself, it seems pretty clear he was probably involved in this shooting attempt on Alex.
Well, because if you're confused, Alex is also going to die as well.
Yeah. Eventually, we're going to lose Alex. Now, in that October, he's accused of shooting Brandon. I think I just said he's accused of shooting Alex, but he's accused of shooting Brandon. Also in that October, just days before Tammy's death, Tammy is approached by a man in a face mask in her driveway. Now, Tammy told friends she believed that the man was holding a paintball gun and that he tried to fire at her before running off. Okay, you guys got to remember, it's small town Salem, Idaho. No one is going to pull a real gun on you in your driveway.
Yeah.
At least that's how Tammy is going to view it. So she just thinks this is some kid
paintball gun,
goofing off, has a paintball gun, and that he's trying to scare her. But then she dies just days later in her bed.
Right.
So the wake of destruction that these two people have in their path, because first there's Charles, then the kids, then an attempt on Brandon, then the death of Tammy, and we're not done. Because Chad and Lori are married in a beachside wedding in Hawaii just 2 weeks after Tammy's death, and Chad is right on top of that life insurance policy that he received for Tammy's death. The two are living off of JJ and Tylee's Social Security benefits, and now the life insurance policy of Tammy. So they're bankrolled for a while, right? I remember trying to close out my dad's stuff. Yeah. I tried to help my mother as much as possible. It was days before we went to work on the life insurance policies. We were grieving.
Yeah. Yeah.
He is doing this within, like that Monday morning.
Yeah.
That Monday morning, he's on top of this life insurance policy.
Well, and then just taking his new bride to Hawaii.
Yeah. Okay. Just days after they marry, people start to actively look for the missing children.
And this might be where you remember first hearing about this case is these two kids have been missing in Rexburg, I guess, for quite some time. And the mom has run off and remarried this new guy, and they're just in Hawaii.
Yep.
And everyone was like, what's going on? Where are the kids? If they're not in Hawaii, where are they?
Yep. So the police, they've been notified by JJ's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, and she's telling them, I can't get in touch with them anywhere. And Arizona police are also raising concerns because of Charles' death. So Arizona's talking to Rexburg. Kay Woodcock is talking to Rexburg police also. So they're all kind of becoming familiar with the name Lori Vallow.
Yeah.
Lori and Chad come back from their wedding, and they're back in Rexburg. Police contact Lori. In that face-to-face contact, she says the kids are with her friend Melanie in Arizona, and she would call them, but they were currently at a movie theater watching a movie, so she can't get a hold of them right now. But she'll make sure that she gets a hold of them, and that when cops come back, they'll have a chance to speak with the kids. Now, in those initial police contacts, police also speak with Chad Daybell, and he claims he doesn't know who Lori is.
But they're married.
Yeah. They're married at the time. And police are starting to put two and two together. They're like, okay, wait, your wife died. These kids are missing.
Your ex-husband died.
Yeah, they're all starting to add it all together.
Yeah.
The next day, police return to Lori's townhome. Lori's gone.
Yep.
And so is Alex, who lives a few doors down. Over the next few months, police are still looking for the kids, and they finally track down Lori and Chad in Hawaii. And they're like kind of hopping from resort to resort. They've been living there. Chad's thinner. He's got a new hairstyle. His hair's a little longer. He doesn't look like so much like Dad Chad.
Yeah.
He looks like Chad trying to look a little bit hotter.
Right.
And more put together. They're telling people the kids are perfectly safe. And for some people, The next death is really a point of strong controversy. This is where Alex comes in.
Yes.
Because in December, Alex dies in a Las Vegas home of a woman that he just married. So Alex marries this woman named Zulema. They've been married for 2 weeks. They don't really have a courtship. They're just supposed to be married. And there's this kind of this push by Chad to do this. And then all of a sudden, Alex is dead in this woman's home in Las Vegas. And authorities determined that he died from a blood clot, and his body is cremated shortly after his death.
So there's no going back and looking for anything else. And a lot of the true crime people in this case believe that Alex was the third person who knew what everyone had done, right?
Yes.
Lori knows, Chad knows, and Alex knows because he's had a hand in a lot of these deaths. They believe that he had a hand with the kids. He obviously shot Charles. So there are a lot of people who believe that at this point, Alex has served his purpose in Chad and Lori's story. And so it was time to get rid of him.
Yes. Yep. He's already done his deal, right? He's protected her.
Right.
And maybe he potentially knows too much.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the, people who follow this case believe that Alex now is in the way too. Remember, this wake of destruction, we're getting rid of people that are in our way the whole time.
Right.
Potentially Alex is now in the way. He knows too much.
Or he did just randomly die of a blood clot. They cremated his body and we'll never know.
Yeah, we might never know. Okay, so finally, all of this has happened in December. We're still searching for the kids. We can't find Lori and Chad.
Everyone in the nation is talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Finally, on February 20th, Lori is arrested in Kauai and charged with desertion and non-support of her children. Several days later, she's extradited to Idaho. And then COVID-19 lockdowns begin 2 weeks later. This was such a chaotic time. And I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for local reporting, I think this case would have gotten lost by the public.
Yep.
We have a man in East Idaho who has connections to Hawaii via his employer, and he has been able to provide so much information with this case. He worked hand in hand with Dateline. I truly believe this case would have never seen as much mainstream media had it not been for that local reporting.
Right.
Okay. But police weren't forgetting about it. They were doggedly pursuing the whereabouts of the children. They had brought the FBI in. They're in Hawaii. They're in Arizona. They're in Utah asking questions. And then finally in June of 2020, the remains of Tylee and JJ were unearthed in Chad Daybell's backyard.
Which was just mind-blowing to everyone following this case, because why are they in your own backyard?
I think this goes back to their exaltation thing.
Yeah.
They thought they could get away with it. And I have mentioned this before. You can speak to this. That home in Salem, if Chad, Alex, Lori, whoever had the dead bodies, if they had driven just 10 miles north, those bodies would have never been found.
Mm-mm. That's how close they were to just desolation and
forest and areas where they could have gotten rid of those bodies. I mean, I'm not trying to plan this murder for them, but I think that just shows the arrogance of these two people.
For sure.
If you had just driven 10 miles north, those bodies wouldn't have been in the backyard.
But they just buried them in the backyard.
Now, Chad was arrested that day for the deaths of his two children. And Lori, she's been hanging out in the Madison County Jail because she hadn't produced the two kids to authorities. And now she's charged with the murders of the two as well. And then the next 3 years has drug on. Tammy's exhumed and an autopsy is done on her body. And I want to point out something here that I don't think gets talked about a lot. The exhumation of Tammy was so respectful. They meaning the authorities, really worked hard to show respect to Tammy in that time. They took her body out of the ground early on a morning, did the autopsy, and put her back on the same day.
Before telling any of the press.
Yes. For me, that's a big deal. And I think it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Because I think, if as a family who's buried a loved one and then whether it was before or after being told your loved one was probably murdered, to then have to put to rest your loved one and then exhume them, that's a lot. That's a lot.
And I think it would have been horrible if it had been this big media spectacle. Yes. And it wasn't that. And I am incredibly proud of law enforcement for taking those steps to make that so respectful. And she deserved it, let's be honest.
Right.
Well, last year, at this time, almost right before the holiday, Lori was found guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of JJ and Tylee. She was also found guilty for conspiracy to commit murder for JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. And then she was found guilty of the fraud with the money, the Social Security fraud. So every charge that had been brought forward in that trial, she was found guilty for. Now, the death penalty was off the table in Lori's case, and I have spoken to 2 defense attorneys in East Idaho. They have told, and they're very well-respected defense attorneys. One of them does handle capital punishment cases. They told me the true win for the defense attorneys for Lori was the fact that they accomplished getting rid of the death penalty in her case. Lori could only be sentenced to life in prison. She could not be sentenced to the death penalty.
I will say I did not expect Lori to be convicted. I didn't expect it. I thought that there was a pretty good chance that she would be able to pin the entire thing on Alex and Chad, say she had no idea they were going to do this. She's just been along for the ride. She was just an innocent bystander in this. And, once the kids were missing, Chad had told her that he had sent them to be with someone, and she believed Chad with her whole heart. She's been under his spell. Like, I really thought that the defense might be able to get away with it.
I was a little nervous too, particularly for the conspiracy to commit murder charge on Tammy.
Yeah.
That was the one, if I thought a jury might side one way, I thought potentially it was that one, because that's the least amount of connection for Lori.
Right. She could have easily not had a hand in it.
Mm-hmm. I think the big key in her getting convicted for that one was the fact that she was planning a wedding prior to the death.
Probably.
And they looked at it and said, of course she was conspiring. She was figuring she was going to marry Chad immediately. Yeah. So had she not searched for those wedding rings on Amazon, had she not been looking for a wedding dress, had there not been some texts referring to the fact that Tammy's going to die early, I'm not sure they could have gotten her for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the trials have been really different. Lori's trial and Chad's trial. Lori would not allow her defense team to put on basically any kind of a defense. They would slightly cross-examine certain witnesses, but they didn't place a single witness of their own on the stand, and Lori obviously didn't testify. And there is rumor that there was a big blow-up by Lori, huge blow-up on the last day of her trial when her defense attorneys stood up and gave their closing arguments and talked about, I don't know how to phrase this, like kind of what a loser Chad is.
Yeah.
They kind of referred to him as not much of a man, and apparently she lost it after those closing arguments and let her defense attorneys have it.
Which makes which makes you think she really does believe this. They believe.
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, I got swept up in the, no, like I think she really believes Chad is. Yeah.
I think so too. Now, okay, at her sentencing hearing, we got to finally hear from Lori. And in her remarks, she said she had spoken to Jesus. And she knew that all was well. Mm-hmm. She said that no murders had occurred, and that Jesus understands that accidental deaths happen, and that fatal doses of medications are accidentally administered.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. She also said her good friend Tammy, that's what she referred to this woman. She was cheating on with Chad. Like she's causing infidelity in this marriage.
And her good friend Tammy, who was talking to Chad about her dying early.
Yes. In her sentencing hearing, she said that her good friend Tammy was happy and in a good place. So she's found guilty, sentenced to life in prison. She's also headed down to Arizona. She's actually in Arizona right now because they're going to try her for the death of Charles as well. Okay. Now, here we are. 1 year later, we're in the middle of Chad's trial. In fact, the state rested their case on Thursday.
but not without some fireworks. So for avid listeners of Rise and Crime, here's where the update comes into place. Here's where there's new information. On Thursday, Judge Boyce caught a critical error in the indictment against Chad Daybell for the death of JJ Vallow. So just one, he's being charged with Tammy, with Lori, and with Tylee, but there is a problem with the indictment for JJ. So it wasn't the defense that caught it, and it wasn't the state that caught it. The judge actually caught the state's error. So it came down to this. All the other indictments read that the death occurred on or about this date to this date.
Right.
But in JJ's indictment, it says that on or between. So that JJ's death happened on or... You okay?
I feel like something's in my hair. It's like moving. My hair is moving on its own.
Well, you're shaking. You were shaking the...
Okay, maybe I'm fine.
Okay.
We watch back. There's a mouse has just crawled out of my head.
But JJ's indictment said on or between, which means the date range is exact.
Right.
Like you can't extend past those two dates.
It's not about.
It's exact or in between those dates. And in this case, that's just not accurate for the dates that were presented at trial. So you guys, this had the courtroom buzzing for about 3 hours as the judge reviewed what each side said about the mistake. Now, Chad's attorney was adamant that the charge...
Obviously.
Yeah, of course he's going to be.
Yeah.
Adamant that the charge needed to be dropped since the state had rested their case. But Judge Boyce denied that request. And as of now, the charge for JJ's death will still be considered by the jury. Judge Boyce did say the clerical error would need to be corrected before the jury gets the case, and that he's going to research how to best do that so that we don't cause any problems with appeals and things like that, and he's going to rule on the error later, probably next week, I'm going to guess, at some time. So for now, all the charges are remaining the same. Also, as part of the update on Thursday, FBI analyst Doug Hart, who I saw in person, by the way, when I was attending Lori's trial, because I went over for a day, and it just happened to be the day that Doug Hart was on the stand. I sat next to his parents. They were there to watch their son testify, and they were so incredibly proud of his service. It was very, very sweet to see the love that they have for the son. He also looks exactly like an FBI agent should look. Like he would be cast in a movie as an FBI agent. So he testified on Thursday that shortly after Charles was killed by Alex, Chad and Lori began sending texts about death percentages. Now, these percentages were markers of how close JJ, Tylee, and Tammy were to dying. So they're actually like reading the tea leaves or trying to see when are these three
It's like that
die?
Thing when you swing to see your gender of your baby and stuff, but they're like, when is their death coming that we're causing?
Yeah, you do know he did that, right? He had a pendulum.
Okay, yeah.
He had one of those things that would swing back and forth.
Is today the day I murder my wife?
Yeah, he did. And so this is how they're determining these death percentages. So I'm going to just totally give my personal opinion on these texts and between Lori and Chad. I feel like they're kind of working each other up into a frenzy all the time.
In their texts.
Yeah, back and forth in their texts. Because they're always talking about the deaths and are we going to need to? Are we not going to need to? Oh, JJ's so naughty. Oh, they're so dark. Like this is the communication they're having back and forth until they finally commit the crimes. Yeah. Allegedly in Chad's case. And then they're also always working each other sexually. Like they're always sexually flirting. Texting back and forth. Talking about their, like Chad names his manhood.
Oh.
Yep.
What was it?
The Storm.
Oh,
that's what Chad calls his manhood.
I thought it was going to be like Peter, Paul, or John.
No, it's the Storm.
The Storm.
Yeah, he thinks a lot of himself.
That's crazy.
He thinks a lot of himself.
Storm.
Okay. All right. So they're always working each other up. And that brings up another update that was revealed in testimony last week. We heard some of this in Lori's trial, but it was testified to in this trial that Lori and Alex, her brother, had a really close relationship. Like, as adults, she would sit on his lap all the time. And he would pick her up and hug her, and she would wrap her legs around him. And then when her legs are wrapped around them, he would sit and bounce her up and down on his hips.
What was Alex, the Thunder?
I have no idea what his name was. Never was revealed in the text. Yeah. But that's what's going on between these two.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So, and we also learned that there are possibly other people that narrowly escaped the behaviors of Alex, Chad, and Lori, because in those death percentage conversations, it wasn't just about JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. It also included her niece's children, asking if they were close to death. So could they have potentially killed other kids?
Like planned on doing it, yeah.
Maybe. And FBI agent Hart also testified that when Alex moved to Rexburg, so this was in the summer of 2020, when he set up his Wi-Fi, he made his Wi-Fi password too many kids. That was the password for his Wi-Fi.
They just shouldn't have had kids.
They just shouldn't have. None of it. None of this whole religious thing should have never happened. Like, they shouldn't have had kids.
I'm so confused why you're hating the kids so much.
They're just kids.
It's not their fault.
Mm-hmm. And Lori and Alex, they share texts back and forth laughing about this Wi-Fi password.
Laughing about a Wi-Fi password with too many kids when you're going to go on and get charged for murdering your own 2 kids is crazy.
Yeah. Okay, these texts also revealed that Chad believed he could cause pain on people. So this was other stuff that came out on Thursday. So he would text Lori saying he could zap JJ if he was getting to be like too much. So I need you to understand what I'm saying here. He would be able to use the spirit to cause harm to JJ, to make him stop misbehaving or to stop him from behaving badly. And one of these particular times was when Lori is in the car with JJ and he's acting up. So she's on a road trip.
Yeah.
And she's texting Chad and telling Chad how bad JJ is behaving. And Chad sent back that he could remotely cause the pain to make JJ stop acting up.
He said, I'm eating dinner with my wife. Her death is on Thursday. Let me leave the room, harness my power, and zap JJ before you kill him.
Pretty much. So the trials, they're loaded with so much more. I feel like we could be going on forever, but this has been long. I wanted to point out one more thing, though. Okay, remember the neighbor friends that Chad was introducing Lori to that just days after Lori's death? Okay. Or Tammy's death. Well, when Lori was arrested in February of 2020, Chad went to those neighbors and asked them to put their house up as collateral for the bond that was set for Lori. The nerve, I don't even understand the nerve.
Yeah.
That you would show up at your friend's house who are followers of you and you're going to say, hey, I need to get Lori out of jail. This woman that I started, a relationship with, according to them, days after Tammy dies. And I need your house as collateral so I can get her out.
That does feel very cult leaderish to do.
Very.
To have the audacity to think that someone should do that.
That you could control these followers. Yeah. All right. Chad's attorney, John Pryor, he'll begin his defense arguments today. And he's hinted he'll be calling 3 of Chad's 5 kids as witnesses and also 2 different experts that are supposed to refute the cell phone evidence and potentially the DNA and backyard evidence. A reminder, Chad's DNA isn't on anything.
Yeah.
Nowhere. Lori's DNA and a hair from Lori was found on JJ, but it's her kid.
Yeah.
That presumably was killed either at her townhome
right.
or hours after the picture of him in the red pajamas.
Right.
So
That's how he's going to present. John Pryor's also been very aggressive, much more aggressive than Lori's attorneys. And that's because Chad's allowing him to be.
Right.
He's good with it. Now, the state tried to show that Chad is the instigator of it all in this trial. He was the leader that convinced Lori that the two would escort 144,000 of their followers in July of 2020 when Christ would come again. Yeah.
Spoiler alert, he didn't.
It didn't happen, and they were both in jail at that time.
Yeah.
But in Lori's trial a year ago, Lori was painted as a black widow. So the two trials are a lot different.
Yeah.
Which is okay. The state is trying to get a conviction.
Yeah, they don't have to really be, super. They can say that Lori was a bad person and then at the next trial say Chad was a bad person.
Yeah, they don't have to be duplicates of each other. I think there's been some talk online about they feel like that is a dishonest approach. I completely understand the approach. If I was trying to implicate and convince a jury and show them proof, I would be in Chad's trial showing all of the proof that Chad's a cult leader. That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep everyone updated as the defense moves forward next week. Do you have any closing thoughts on this case?
I will be interested to see, but I personally feel like we're probably going to see a very similar result to what happened with Lori. I will be surprised if he's not convicted on all charges.
I would completely agree with that. Where I think we might see something is it is very hard for a jury to come to the conclusion of a death penalty.
Yes.
And I'm not sure they will be able to come to that conclusion here.
So I guess we'll see.
And there's been a lot of talk about which one is actually better for Chad. Getting the death penalty or life in prison.
Alive. Yeah.
Because Chad is not going to get treated well.
Right.
In prison.
He hasn't already.
Yeah. He's in a very small jail in Fremont County. It's a different county than the jail that Lori was in. And we've heard, rumor is, that the inmates mock him and tease him. And it's not going to get any better in a state prison at all.
Right.
All right. Guess what? We've been talking for an hour.
I know. We thought we would do multiple cases, and here we are.
So I'll give you a teaser at what I'm going to bring you on Thursday. So I've totally been following the update to the Sean P. Diddy Combs case. There's been a video released. I will show that to you on Thursday. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's some abusive behavior by, I always call him Sean. What would you call him if you were doing this case?
Probably P. Diddy.
P. Diddy is what you'd know him by. Yeah. I always call him Sean. He has so many different names. So be watching for that on the episode that's coming out on Thursday. And that's your Monday episode of Rise and Crime with a little twist of Payton included. Make sure you subscribe and follow, and you can leave me a comment on all of the various platforms, and 5-star reviews help the podcast grow. They also help Ono Media grow. If you haven't listened to either Into the Dark or Murder with My Husband, give them a look.
Yeah.
They're awesome. And you can join me again on Thursday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules.
And I'm Payton Moreland.
And keep safe out there.